All right. What what was your husband's name?
Charles Emmanuel Sierer.
And did he volunteer or was he drafted?
He was drafted. He was drafted in October of 1940, and he was classified Class C, and his number was 106. That meant he'd be one of the first ones called. And then he was classified, and he at Lycans, and he was classified a 2B. And then he was recruited. Do you want this information? He was recruited from the U.S. Navy recruiting station in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, on April the 7th in 1944. It was Good Friday.
How old was he when he entered the war? Just approximately.
27.
Do you know what regiment he was in?
He became part of the Pontoon Assembly Detachment number 5 in the Seabees. He was in the Navy, but he was in the Seabees.
How much and what kind of training did he receive?
Well, he went to Bainbridge, Maryland first when he was recruited, and then they sent him to Davisville, Rhode Island for his boot training, and from there they sent him to California to a welding school because they needed welders, and they gave him 40 hours of training of welding in California, and that's where he got his training for that. He wasn't a welder, but they needed welders in the service, so this is what they did.
Do you know what his expectations of the war and how those expectations met?
Well, at that time, with being war in Europe and now war in the Pacific, the Japanese had attacked us. You didn't have much expectations, I don't believe, about anything. You just wanted to do your duty and help your nation overcome these enemies and free our nation. And we were really up to our neck, both on the Pacific and the Atlantic Ocean, in Europe and the Pacific area.
Where was he stationed and did he relocate often?
He went from the training school in California to Seattle, Washington, where he was put on a boat, and they took him to Guam. But I didn't know where he was going. He couldn't tell me. Everything was censored. Do you want me to tell you about that? His mail was censored. He could not tell me where he was going or what they were doing. And my mail was censored to him also. It was security. They had security in World War II, and this was part of it. They didn't want the enemy to know what they were doing, where they were at, or what was happening. And of course, we ourselves did not know.
Do you know, did he tell you about what his daily schedule was like on a day when he wasn't in battle?
He wasn't in battle because he's with the Seabees. When they landed in Guam, Guam had been captured by the Japanese, and now we captured it back by bombarding it from the air and from boats. And it was Marines landed first, and they secured the island, killing the Japanese. And then after they had taken the island and secured it, then the Seabees entered afterwards, followed them, and they established their camp, and they made a base there. And his daily routine was they lived in a tent city in the mud at first, and then they built their barracks, they built roads in the area where they were stationed in their company, and they built a hospital, not a big hospital, just like you see in MASH, I think. It was just a barracks so that they could use this. And then they built a harbor, and their duty, what they were sent there for, was to build dry docks that they could bring our ships that were damaged into the harbor, put them on the dry docks, raise them out of the water, and weld them and repair the damage that was done to them. And then after the ships were finished and ready, then they sent them back to sea and back to war. So they were very busy. They were fed well. They had a lot of good food, but they were Seabees. That's what they did.
Do you know if he kept a journal or a diary?
No, he didn't.
Um, do you know what he did during his downtime?
I don't think they had much downtime except because they worked many, many hours a day to finish the work that they were sent there to do. They ate well and they slept and worked.
Did he write home often?
I'd say at least once a week.
Do you know what kinds of food he ate there?
He told me the food was very good and they were well fed. That was one thing that was a plus with the Seabees and the work they did. The only time they came in contact with the enemy was at nighttime when the Japs that were still on the island, they were dug into holes and tunnels or wherever they could hide. They would come out at night for food because they were starving to death. So they had to have guards on duty around the perimeter of their camp all the time. But they never came under any enemy fire or bombardment and so forth. They were not in a war per se, but their duty was to make the harbor, the pontoons, dry docks, to bring the ships in to repair them.
Was he ever wounded or injured?
No, he had one injury, but he, like I say, he didn't want to report it because he didn't want to have to go to the hospital and not be able to come home because the war was over, and he wanted to get home. He wanted to get discharged.
How long was he away from home?
He left on Good Friday on April 4th, 1944, and he came home a year and a half later, in November the 23rd, 1945. And I remember they had a dance out at the high school for at that time, and he took me out to the dance. He went out to the dance at the high school. He said, I stayed at home all those months, and that's what we did.
Do you know what his most memorable experience was while he was over there?
I think when his brother's ship pulled into the harbor, and his brother was with him until his ship was repaired. He was in the Navy too, and to think that their brothers met on Guam, it was unusual.
How did the war change his life?
Well, he missed a year and a half of his children growing up. Our baby was born while he was in California, our third child, and he never saw her till she was over a year old. And she was a year old November the 13th, and he came home November the 23rd. And I had a picture of him on a coffee table. And whenever I got a letter from Daddy, I always read a special note to the children. Whether it was there or not, I made them realize Daddy was writing to them too. He did, of course, but I made it special for them. And so that when Daddy came home, his daughter had never seen him, knew him, he was her daddy.
Did any other members of his family serve?
Yes, he had 2 other brothers that served.
Okay. And like you said, you have memorabilia to share with us?
Yes, I do.
How was it for you when your husband went away to war back here in Millersburg?
Well, first of all, I was left with 2 small children, and I had my 3rd baby while he was gone. And we found our food was rationed, our shoes, our gas, everything was rationed really. Butter, sugar, and I think we had cards that when we went to the store, they would punch, and we were allowed so many pounds of meat a month. And the reason it was rationed, we had to supply our troops in Europe and in the Pacific area with food and all these things that they needed. So therefore, we had to do without. Today we aren't suffering like that, are we? But, and we had everything censored then. Now nothing's censored. We had security then. They had air raid sirens blow if they thought there was any danger or any plane flying that they didn't know whose it was. They didn't have the technology to know the way they do today. And the air raid sirens would sound, and we have black blinds on all our windows. And when the air raid sounded, we would turn our lights down and pull those blinds down so there'd be no light shining. There were no street lights at night because we didn't want any of our towns or any cities to be targets in case a plane did fly over. And when the air raid sirens sounded, the children were trained that if they were in school, they would get under their desks or go into closets or hallways where they'd be safer from flying glass or whatever. If they were on the streets, they were supposed to lay down in the gutters and put their hands over their heads, to protect themselves. And we had many air raids at that time. And our sirens sounding, not that we had actual raids, we didn't, but they had that security set up for us. And everybody was kind to me, though, as a mother. I mean, I had people very, very kind to me, and always appreciated certain ones that were special. But it wasn't easy, because you didn't know where your husband was at, what he was doing, what danger he was in. You had no idea. You had no way of knowing. And I know I didn't listen to the news. It would just irritate you and upset you. So I just never listened to the news. And I couldn't afford the papers, so I didn't have any papers I didn't read. So I was just in my own little home with my 3 children, surviving and trying to raise them normally and making them happy and taking care of them. I was busy. They were 3, 2, and 1. No, 4, 2, and 1. They were 2 years apart, all 3 of them. So I was busy. I used to say that till I got them all dressed to go out when it was cold, with their boots and their snowsuits, that I was exhausted. I didn't feel like going for a walk, but we did. We survived. And I put the baby out on the porch, on the balcony, in the fresh air, so she would be out in the fresh air, so they'd get in front of fresh air. And the other 2 children could go down the yard and play, but we did our best. I know with oranges, they were hard to get too. I would give the children the orange juice, and then I would eat the pulp out of the orange shells myself. We didn't waste a thing. It was interesting. We survived with God's help. We did all right.
This is the memorabilia Margaret had to share about her husband, Charles.
When he was drafted, he had to sign up at the draft board. I think it was up at Lycans. It was Upper Dauphin County. And he had the card that he had to carry with him all the time. It's his registration telling him that where he was from. And then, of course, as time went by, that was in 1940, that first time when he registered with the draft. And then we got a card, November 1940, and it tells of the local class board. He's registered, he's in class 3, and his number is 106. That was his rotation number. And then we received a card in December the 8th, 1943, from the local board of Dauphin County, Lycans, and here he was classified 2B. He was coming up because now the war in Germany was going on, but also the war with the Japanese, and they needed more men, and they needed more personnel in order to take care of the people that they needed in the services. Now, Charles was in the Navy, but he was in the Seabees, and as I said, their duty was to build and to repair ships. And here was his recruit when he was taken into the service. He received this card at Harrisburg on 4/7/44. That was the day that they took them to Harrisburg to enter into the active duty of the Navy. And these cards they had to carry with them at all times. This is a daily chow pass. It says, please admit dealer bearer to early chow. In other words, he had a chow pass early. And this tells the things, decorations, and insignia that he's entitled to wear. The CB insignia, and that is this. It's a patch and has CB on it. This was attached to his uniform. He was to wear it. This is the Asiatic medal. It's a World War II medal, and on the back of it, it says, freedom from fear and want, freedom of speech and religion. And it's the United States of America, 1941 to 1945. That is the one medal he had. And then here is a ruptured duck. And I found out from the internet that the ruptured duck, and it has the wing going through the heart, or the signet here, and it's a pin that they wore when they were discharged. And this allowed them to wear that uniform for 30 days after they were discharged because there was a shortage of clothing at that time. I heard a lot about the ruptured duck, but I didn't realize what it was. And he was a sharpshooter. He in marksmanship and so forth. And this is a Naval Reserve honorable discharge pin. And this is a coconut that Charles sent to us, and the stamps were fastened to it with staples, and it came just like this through the mail. Mrs. Charles C.E. Sierer, North Street, Millersburg, Pennsylvania, and I've had it all these years. And then also he brought home for me shells that they made from Guam. This is a necklace. This can be worn as a belt or a necklace. They're small seeds, all put together. And I had earrings to match this too. They're the same type of shells from Guam. Then also, I found, while I was going through his things, I find Japanese money. It's interesting to see and to look at. It's all different types. Very interesting, I think. And this is money from the Philippines, too. 1 peso. 2 pesos. Is there anything else?
I'm gonna go over.
Oh, this is his discharge. Honorable discharge from the United States Navy. He was Charles Emmanuel Sierer, shipfitter, 3rd class. As I said, they taught him to be a welder. And it's the CBs, United States Navy Reserves. And it's Personal Separation Center from Bainbridge, Maryland. And this was on November the 23rd, 1945. And that is his honorable discharge. By the way, he hitchhiked at home. They did a lot of hitchhiking those days, and he hitchhiked at home from Bainbridge. Anything else?
No.
No. Oh.
When Charles was in Rhode Island for boot trading, he came with his friend, a buddy, for the weekends when they had pass. And there they are in their uniforms. And here's a picture of Charles and his brother Jake on Guam, where they met and were with each other. And then I have a picture. What did I do with that? Here it is. A picture of myself and my husband and our children, Barbara and Butch, Charles Jr. This was right before he left to go into the Navy.